Hello, and welcome to Entangled, the podcast where we explore the science of consciousness, the true nature of reality, and what it means to be a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm your host, Jordan Euclid, and this is the series on the real Robert F. Kennedy. In this series, we explore which politician today embodies the RFK of our generation. In part 4, we discuss the influence of Marxism on modern America and the communist goal of destruction of the nuclear family. We examine how this influence has manifested in the debate on abortion and explore the relationship between abortion and eugenics. We continue our examination on the Marxist influence behind Black Lives Matter, the relationship between BLM and transgenderism, and the intelligence agency's involvement in ideological subversion. Outros are available for this and all episodes at entangledpodcast.substack.com. Music from the show is available on the Spotify playlist Entangled The Vibes. If you like the show, please drop a 5-star review and subscribe on Substack, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please enjoy the episode. Marxism and Destruction of the Family. When I started writing this essay, I viewed Martin Luther King Jr. as a hero of American history. I thought that this great man improved race relations in America, setting us on the proper course after we'd been led astray. Yet as I've confronted the true darker history of America over the last several years, I've come to recognize that our history books do a phenomenal job of vilifying the heroes and idolizing the villains. I didn't understand why the economic situation for our black communities could be so atrocious today if the victories of the civil rights movement were the groundbreaking achievements they've been made out to be. Then, as synchronicity would have it, while writing this episode, Tucker Carlson interviewed Vince Everett Ellison. What he had to say was challenging for me to hear, but I could not deny the truth in his words. His commentary helped me to understand what's really been going on with race relations in America over the past 60 years.
So the civil rights movement, the official civil rights movement, was and is still described as a Christian movement.
Yeah.
Was it?
No, anything but. It's been a lot of great scholarship done recently. Virgil Walker has done a lot of good scholarship. James MacArthur has done some good scholarship. And John MacArthur, they've looked at King's papers from Stanford. Come to find out that King wasn't even a Christian.
He wasn't a Christian?
No, they said he didn't believe in the deity of Christ, didn't believe in the virgin birth, didn't believe in the resurrection, didn't believe in hell. If you don't believe in those things, you can't be a Christian.
No, that's true. So
when you look at his monument inside of D.C., do you notice Reverend is not on it?
No, I didn't know that.
There's nothing about God on that monument. Nothing. This is not a mistake. This is a confession. They knew exactly who they were. And our Bible tells us that a tree is known, how do you know a false prophet? A tree is known by the fruit it bears.
That's right.
You will not get good fruit from a bad tree or bad fruit from a good tree. Each tree and its fruit will be after its own kind. So when you look at the black community and the condition that it's in, if it's bad fruit, the tree had to be bad.
That's right.
And if it's bad fruit, it's a false prophet. It's binary. And when you look at where we were between 1940 and 1960, the black community had cut its poverty rate from 80% to about 35% in 20 years, the greatest reduction of poverty in the history of the world. And then after the civil rights movement, we flatlined. Why? We turned from God to government. And Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement led us on that. And we know how King was all tied up with the communists. Man, Stanley Levinson was the one communist in America. Bayard Rustin had been a communist in his youth. The guy that ran the SELC, his name was Jack Odell, Hunter Pitts Odell. He was a communist. King's lawyer, Clarence Jones, was a communist. Clarence Jones and Stanley Levinson say they wrote the I Have a Dream speech. They were both communists. And when you look at the I Have a Dream speech, it's amazing when you dissect it and deconstruct it. Because when King says 5 times in that speech, the first thing he said was, 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, the Negro is still not free. That is a lie. I was born free. My freedom is a gift from God. It's an unalienable right. According to John Locke in his second treatise of government, it is irrevocable, non-transferable, and unsellable. Now, King says 5 times in that speech that we were not free. And at the end, he has that great refrain that on some certain day we'll be free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty we're free at last. Still telling us we're not free. And we make our children recite that speech every year on his birthday, saying that they're not free, that they come to government for their unalienable right to freedom. You don't ask government for your freedom. You defy government to come and try to take it from you. What did our founding fathers say when King George said, I'm your sovereign? No, you're not. I'm going to show you. And he said, I'm not just going to come in and kill you guys. I'm going to bring you back to Great Britain. I'm going to choke you till you're almost dead. Then I'm going to castrate you. Then I'm going to cut you open, let you see your guts before you die. And then after you're dead, I'm going to cut off your limbs and send them to the uttermost parts of the British Empire. And guess what the founding fathers said? Did the declaration and said, we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Put their names on it, sent it to him, and said, bring it. And whooped his ass. Free men. And then they walked around with their chest stuck out. Yeah, we did it. And King is wandering around. King would have asked King George. He said, well, boss, can we be free? No. Well, okay then. We'll just march until you decide to give it to us. The Father said, you don't give us our freedom. We earn it. It's ours. Come and try to take it. And this is the mindset that they've placed into America, Black America first, but now America. And look at the results of it. We're at the bottom of every socioeconomic statistic in America. And there's a revolution now happening here in America. They're turning against the Democratic Party. They're turning away from it because they're seeing that it's not working. Joe Biden walking around, the MAGA crowd, going to put you in the back of the buses. The MAGA crowd going to put you back in the cotton field. And black folks looking at him like, what? Hey, you didn't see him at Morehouse College?
Yeah, just the other day.
One of the funnest things I ever saw in my life.
What
These are young black men, 21, 22 years old, right? He up there talking, they're going to put you in the back of the buses. They're going to make you your hamburgers in the back of the restaurant. And they're looking at him like, he was more like Rasputin than he was Jesus Christ. He became an indispensable person in government for a very long time because they put so much behind him. I read this great book. I can't think of the name of it now. They talked about that the civil rights movement was more about the Cold War than it was about anything else. Because the Russians were using the propaganda of how America treated black people to have African nations and Asian nations come to communism.
Yes, that's true.
You're our comrades. You're our brothers.
That's right.
They had W.B. Du Bois come to China.
Yes.
He gave him all kind of awards and everything. Stalin had these guys. Malcolm X would go over there and talk. So they were using it as a propaganda piece. And they said, we have to take care of this. So King was their front man in this effort. They didn't know King was compromised by the communists until right before the March on Washington. And that's when Bobby Kennedy told, first Deke DeLoach told him, get these communists out.
Number 2 guy at the FBI.
Yeah, he wouldn't do it. Then Bobby Kennedy told him, man, you got to get these guys out. He wouldn't do it. And then right before the March on Washington, the big 7, big 6, whatever, came to the White House. And Bobby kind of gave John Kennedy a nod. And John Kennedy told King, come out to the Rose Garden. I want to talk to you. He didn't even want it to be bugged in the Oval Office because he was going to share top secret information with him. And he said, I know you're under surveillance. That's lawyer talk for saying you're under surveillance.
Yeah.
You have 3-4 guys in your organization are communists. They got to go. And he called their names to bear. Rustin, Jack O'Dell, Stanley Levinson. He said, these guys are communists and they have to go. And the King tried to deny it. He said, look, do you think I pulled these guys' names out of a hat? I'm the president of the United States of America and I know their name. And he brought up this guy in Great Britain that they called him some type of sex scandal. Forget his name, but he said, you know about this? He said, yes. He said, well, he lost his government behind that. He said, I could do the same thing. If you go down, I go down. You got to get rid of these guys because I'm affiliated with you. They had invested a lot in him. So King said he would do it. Well, J. Edgar Hoover, of course, didn't believe it. And he heard about this group of communists that were going to be meeting down in Dorchester, Georgia. And he set up some cameras to see who was going to show up. And lo and behold, Martin Luther King Jr. showed up in this nest of spies after this long conversation with the president. And he brought these pictures back to Bobby Kennedy and said, I thought he said he's going to get rid of these guys. He's going to cut them loose. And that's when Bobby Kennedy signed to put the wiretaps on him. He said, and it was more to protect him. because they thought he was going to be blackmailed and that he was going to be infiltrated and da. And so they watched him. And as you notice, none of this stuff really got out until, and it is funny how it got out. The night of the Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali fight, 1971, everybody's watching this fight, right? So this group of weirdo communists decided that they were going to burglarize an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania. They burglarized the FBI office, and guess what they found? The COINTELPRO papers.
Yes.
Bought them out and gave them to the Washington Post, to the New York Times. And that's where all the stuff about King came out. It wasn't J. Edgar Hoover, it wasn't the FBI, it wasn't the conservatives. It was the liberals that put it out there. And when people started reading it, they said, oh my God. Hoover had kept King's stuff secret. All of it. Nobody knew it.
The sex stuff.
Yeah, the sex stuff. And then when it got out, the people, King's people wanted to have it all destroyed. And that's when the judge said, no, we're going to take it and we're going to seal it for 50 years. And nobody can see it. But yeah, these liberal morons were the ones that broke into the FBI office and stole it and gave it to the press. And that's how we knew about King's affairs and his 45 girlfriends and his prostitutes and the orgies, which the thing that bothers me more about all of it, Tucker, is the prostitutes. The orgies are bad. We ain't got to talk about that. But when you buy flesh, and you say you're a man of God, I mean, that's very visceral with me.
Yeah.
That's visceral, you know? Just so much terrible stuff. But the fact that, you know, they say he plagiarized his PhD, which means that he was a fake doctor. And then, you know, they say that he wasn't a Christian. It means he was a fake Christian. And he walks around with these communists. And it had gotten so bad that Dietrich Loach finally told J. Edgar Hoover, he said, you can't talk to him. And that's when J. Edgar Hoover then decided to make him an enemy of the state. And this is when it gets interesting with his assassination. When I read this in Taylor Branch's book, Parting the Waters, American King Years, and Taylor Branch is a Democrat.
Yeah.
He's Bill Clinton's roommate at Yale.
Yep.
So it's not a conservative saying this. It's a Democrat, Bill Clinton friend that said this about King. He said that the FBI designated King an enemy of the state. And there's only about 5 or 6 people that have ever been had such designation in the United States of America history. And they said that with this designation, even if they heard that somebody was coming to assassinate him, they wouldn't warn him. And that was a courtesy they would give to mafia dons. They would not give it to King. So they said he's an enemy of the United States of America. This is interesting that he was so affiliated with these people. They found out that money from Moscow was bankrolling the civil rights movement. He was getting money from Moscow to put in his pocket. All of this. That he was deemed the enemy of the United States of America by the federal government.
Who was Obama in retrospect?
God, I think Obama was a part of a worldwide liberal movement. From Western Europe to here. All of them, all of this cabal of weirdos over there in Europe that were pushing things at that time, from Merkel to the guy over France. Obama was involved in all of it. And all this LGBTQ stuff and all this climate change crap started happening then. And it's all designed for a one world government to try to get, I don't know, the World Health Organization or the UN or somebody to start getting some type of criminal court that can start arresting us for not doing what they want us to do.
So I mean, it's funny, the distance between what you thought something was and then what you later learn out it actually was. Mm-hmm. And on the LGBTQ plus, or whatever we're calling it now, I mean, I was raised in a pretty liberal area where we were told that was about, you know, a certain percent of the population, I think it was 10% they said was gay by birth. And, you know, leave them alone. Don't bother them. Right. Like, don't be mean to them.
Exactly.
And that always made sense to me. I don't have zero interest in bothering people in general, particularly over their sex lives. But now I'm starting to think in my age that that actually wasn't kind of what it was about.
No. They understand what they're doing. You know what communism is. Number one is atheism. Why? Because they do not compete for power.
Number one, it's atheism. I agree with
Number one, they don't compete for power. In America, we say there's a higher law than the Constitution. It's God. There's certain rights that we have that you cannot touch, government. That's our whole concept of government. Unalienable rights. We have a Bill of Rights that say you can't touch these, government. The communists say no such ideology exists. The government controls all. So God has to be destroyed. We know that much of LGBTQ is in direct conflict with our Bible. Direct conflict. Absolutely. Martin Luther King Jr. wants to eat a hamburger down south. Racist white man says no. Martin says, I'll be back. This time he brings the federal government. Federal government put a gun to the guy's head. It says either Martin Luther King or your brains are going to be on their lunch counter eating that hamburger. Guy lets him eat. Was Martin Luther King Jr. a violent man? Of course he was. He used violence from a third party.
Yes.
Civil rights movement wasn't a nonviolent movement. A nonviolent movement would have been changing your neighbor's heart by your actions. What does that mean? If he's mean to me, I'm good to him. If you won't let me eat a hamburger at your stand, I'll build another restaurant that's better than yours. You can eat at mine for free. If you won't let me go to your school, I'll build a better school than yours and you can send your child to mine for free. You treat me bad, I treat you right, but you're going to treat me like a man. You're going to treat me with respect. I demand that. And this is how you get your respect. Instead, what did they do? They used the gun. In the book of Corinthians, it says 11 people will not enter the kingdom of heaven. The last one is the extortionist. What's the extortionist? An extortionist is the one that uses violence, threats, coercion to get what they want. And that's what the civil rights movement did. It didn't change the hearts of Americans. It extorted them. It told them either give us what we want or we're going to blow your brains out. We're going to put you in jail. That is not the Christian way. And it failed because they used the tool of the devil to get what they wanted. And it continues to fail. We're at the bottom of every socioeconomic statistic in America because we will not do what we've always supposed to have done, and that was live in this meritocracy. How did we break into the NFL? We showed we were better. How did we break into the NBA? Showed we were better. We went out there and we competed. Mano a mano. I'm going to beat you straight up. Tucker, if you make a glass that's better than this one that will last for 1,000 years, people are not going to care what your color is. They're going to buy it.
What's the tool of the devil that he used?
Extortion.
Yep.
Extortion, coercion. You're going to give me what I'm going to pass a law that says if you don't give me what I want, the federal government is going to put you in jail or kill you. Now, give me what I want. That is not the Christian way. We're not even supposed to sue each other. A lot of people think that the Montgomery bus boycott ended the segregation on the buses. It didn't. It was the NAACP. They had a Supreme Court decision that did it. Martin Luther King's bus boycott just aggravated a lot of people. Didn't do anything. And then people don't know this. 2 years later, the black people sat in the back of the bus again because of white intimidation. Yes, they went back to the back of the bus voluntarily in Montgomery, Alabama. They don't talk about that little tidbit of history. They don't tell people that Rosa Parks was an operative trained at the Highlander Folk School, a communist training camp in Montreal, Tennessee. King, Ralph Abernathy, all of them went there, led by these three communists, Dombrowski and Miles Norton and all of them. They keep that part of a history secret. Yeah, there was a communist training camp in Montreal, Tennessee. They tore it down in the 60s because they found it was a communist training camp. And they're the ones that were training all these people how to use nonviolence resistance to cause violence. Cause violence. They went down to Montgomery and Birmingham and said, we're going to jug at Bull Connor until people start getting water hoses and dogs sicked on them. The concept is to cause violence, to aggravate you until you strike out at me. It's me coming up in your face, so it goes, and then finally you say, Vance, you better leave me alone now. I'll never touch you, but I put my finger in your face and I messed you to a point where you just, and then I say, Tucker's violent. You know, and those were their tactics. And they did, and nothing good came out of it because the black people are poor in Selma and Montgomery than they've ever been.
I've noticed that. No one seems to care.
They don't care because it was about getting them to vote for the Democratic Party so they could take it over. There were 5 million, 6 million latent black votes down south that they could use. And they understood that Stockholm Syndrome was going to take over and they were going to vote for the Democratic Party. As a matter of fact, if you read the history of that time, when the election of 1960 was going on, Martin Luther King Jr. and the rest of them put this thing called a blue bomb. It was a blue piece of paper that they passed to all the churches in the South. And it was talking about how when Martin Luther King Jr. was locked up in jail, that JFK had given Martin Luther King Jr. a phone call and had talked to his wife, and Richard Nixon did not. And that was enough to get 80% of the black people to vote for JFK down South during the election of 1960 and beat Nixon, who had supported the 1957 Civil Rights Act and the 1960 Civil Rights Act. They gave them the right to vote anyway. But it was the blue bomb that did it. And it was them, again, leveraging the black preacher, who, if you want to talk to an ignorant joker, talk to most black preachers in the United States of America. Man, these guys don't know anything about foreign policy, don't know anything about government. All they know about how to get money in their hands for taking black people to the polls to vote for the Democratic Party. And again, if you want,
is that still the case? Is that still the case that the Get Out the Vote operation in the South among Democrats is still heavily reliant on black preachers?
Oh yeah, you ever heard of Souls to the Polls?
No.
Oh yeah, man, you should look it up. Souls to the Polls is an organization run by that's funded by George Soros and his people, and they give every Sunday before the first Tuesday in November, these churches will use church buses to put their congregants in these buses and take them to the polls and have them vote. And this is unspoken, but for every black person that they can get in the bus, they get about $10, $15. And in my documentary, Will You Go to Hell For Me, I have a picture of Raphael Warnock and John Lewis standing in front of a Souls to the Polls bus. It got Souls to the Polls written on it. So yeah, everybody can look up Souls to the Polls and they'll see that it is something. Matter of fact, before the election this year, Kamala Harris was out there talking about Souls to the Polls. They were out there rallying it. Yeah, and it's all about the black church.
In his book, The Iron Triangle, Ellison highlights the accomplishments of 60-plus years of the civil rights movement and one-party control of black America by the Democratic Party. Health. Number 1, on August 24th, 2014, Fox News reported murder has replaced AIDS as the number 1 killer of all black people between the age of 15 and 34. 2, over 400,000 black babies are aborted every year. Between 1882 and 1968, 3,446 blacks were lynched by the Ku Klux Klan. Today, with the help of black preachers, black people kill more of their people in 3 days than the Klan lynched in 86 years. Crime. 1, over 50% of blacks at any time are either in prison, on probation, or on parole. 2, blacks are 7 times more likely than other races to commit murder and 8 times more likely to commit a robbery. 3, blacks are an estimated 39 times more likely to commit a crime against a white person than vice versa, and 136 times more likely to commit a robbery. 4, between 1980 and 2003, the incarceration rate tripled from 320,000 to 1.39 million. Blacks are 7 times more likely than whites to go to prison. 5, of the top 10 most dangerous cities in America, all are majority black. Poverty. 2016 poverty statistics report 22% of black families lived in poverty, the highest in the nation, compared to 19.4% for Hispanics, 8.8% white, 10.1% for Asian. Education. 1, according to Prep Scholar, the average 2017 SAT scores among black students was 941 compared to 1118 for whites, 1083 for Asians, 962 for American Indians, and 990 for Hispanics. 2, Colin Powell's nonprofit America's Promise reported that only 52% of high school students in urban centers graduate. In cities where the black populace is extremely high, like Detroit, Cleveland, and Indianapolis, the dropout rate ranges from 65% to 75%. If a tree is known by the fruit it bears, then this tree is rotten. Is it time to consider that Martin Luther King Jr. was not the man he claimed to be? And if Marxism can be summarized as destruction of the nuclear family and abolition of private property, what evidence might we find of the subversive Marxist influence in America today? Abortion and eugenics. One of the illustrious awards received by Martin Luther King Jr. was the first Margaret Sanger Award in 1966. Margaret Sanger is the founder of Planned Parenthood, the largest organization of abortion clinics in the country. MLK Jr. received his award for his, quote, courageous resistance to bigotry and his lifelong dedication to the advancement of social justice and human dignity, end quote. King received his award alongside President Johnson for LBJ's, quote, vigorous and far-sighted leadership in bringing the United States government to enunciate and implement an affirmative, effective population policy at home and abroad, end quote. In a 1939 letter to Clarence Gamble, a founder of consumer packaged goods giant Procter & Gamble, Sanger wrote the following, quote, there is only one thing that I would like to be in touch with, and that is the Negro Project of the South. I note that you doubt it worthwhile to employ a full-time Negro physician. It seems to me from my experiences where I have been in North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas that while the colored Negroes have great respect for white doctors, they can get closer to their own members and more or less lay their cards on the table, which means their ignorance, superstitions, and doubts. They do not do this with the white people, and if they can train the Negro doctor at the clinic, he can go among them with enthusiasm and with knowledge, which I believe will have far-reaching results among the colored people. His work, in my opinion, should be entirely with the Negro profession and the nurses, hospital, social workers, as well as the county's white doctors. His success will depend upon his personality and his training by us. The minister's work is also important, and also he should be trained, perhaps by the Federation, as to our ideals and the goal that we hope to reach. We do not want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. End quote. We do not want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. What do you think Margaret Sanger could have meant by that? Here's some of what MLK Jr. had to say 27 years later in his acceptance of the first Margaret Sanger Award. Quote, we spend paltry sums for population planning, even though its spontaneous growth is an urgent threat to life on our planet. There is no human circumstance more tragic than the persisting existence of a harmful condition for which a remedy is readily available. Family planning to relate population to world resources is possible, practical, and necessary. Unlike plagues of the Dark Ages or contemporary diseases we do not yet understand, the modern plague of overpopulation is soluble by means we have discovered and with resources we possess. During the past half-century, Negroes have migrated on a massive scale, transplanting millions from rural communities to crammed urban ghettos. In their migration, as with all migrants, they carried with them the folkways of the countryside into an inhospitable city slum. The size of family that may have been appropriate and tolerable on a manually cultivated farm was carried over to the jammed streets of the ghetto. In all respects, Negroes were atomized, neglected, and discriminated against. Yet the worst omission was the absence of institutions to acclimate them to their new environment. Margaret Sanger, who offered an important institutional remedy, was unfortunately ignored by social and political leaders in this period. In consequence, Negro folkways and family size persisted. For the Negro, therefore, intelligent guides of family planning are a profoundly important ingredient in his quest for security and a decent life. There are mountainous obstacles still separating Negroes from a normal existence. Yet one element in stabilizing his life would be an understanding of and easy access to the means to develop a family related in size to his community environment and to the income potential he can command. This is not to suggest that the Negro will solve all his problems through Planned Parenthood. His problems are far more complex, encompassing economic security, education, freedom from discrimination, decent housing, and access to culture. Yet if family planning is sensible, it can facilitate or at least not be an obstacle to the solution of the many profound problems that plague him. End quote. In other words, MLK Jr. is instructing Black Americans not to have as many kids, now that they live mostly in cities. That they should be concerned about the economic hardship of raising children. That Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood offers a simple solution for Black men and women looking to evolve from those outdated folkways built on large family sizes. Today, Planned Parenthood's clinics are disproportionately located in minority neighborhoods, with 51% in areas above 125% of the state minority average. Mark Crutcher and Carol Novielli conducted this research on Planned Parenthood's locations and say the location of abortion centers is the modern equivalent of the population control policies against minorities, especially African Americans, that Planned Parenthood has supported since Margaret Sanger founded it. From Roe v. Wade's passage in 1967 through June of 2018, the estimated number of cumulative abortions in America has been about 59.4 million. Of these, 20.4 million of the fetuses aborted have been of Black Americans. Given that the total black population in 2018 was about 42 million people, the population of black America today would be about 50% larger, if not for abortion. Perhaps it's time to consider that the abortion issue is more nuanced than women's reproductive rights versus conservative white men who want to control their uteruses. And is it possible that Martin Luther King Jr. was knowingly promoting policies that would lead to the destruction of black families? You might be interested to know that Margaret Sanger was joined on the board of Planned Parenthood by another racist eugenicist obsessed with population control, Bill Gates Sr. His son, Bill Gates Jr., would have a career whose resume highlights include the Microsoft monopoly and the COVID-19 pandemic. It's almost enough to make you ask, were Gates Jr.'s decisions during the pandemic focused not on public health, but rather geared towards depopulation? Kamala Harris has made abortion a cornerstone of the first months of her presidential selection. Harris and the Democratic Party elites have used abortion as a rallying cry for women against President Trump, who they claim wants to institute a national abortion ban. This argument is made despite the fact that Trump didn't institute a national abortion ban in the 4 years of his first term, and that he has said explicitly,
to put it simply, it's now up to the states. And like Ronald Reagan, I'm a believer in the exceptions, the 3 exceptions, as you know, and rape, incest, life of the mother, the danger for the life of the mother. And we have a situation now where it's in the states' hands, and the states are going to be voting. The last thing people want, the people are going to be voting. The last thing people want is for that to go back into the federal government. It was always fought, and very importantly, and people wanted it, they wanted it back in the states where it belongs legally and for a lot of other reasons.
So you wouldn't support a national ban?
No, I wouldn't support a national ban. No, I would not.
Harris has decried the Dobbs v. Jackson Supreme Court decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, as an attack on women's reproductive rights. She has promised to reinstate the protections of Roe v. Wade via legislative action instead, but has been unable to clearly define what those protections should be.
On the issue of abortion and rallying behind the idea of this federal law to restore what was upheld in Roe versus Wade. But to do that, Democrats need 60 votes in the Senate. They need a majority in the House they don't have. They need the presidency. The math doesn't add up. So don't you need to level with the American people and say this is not a realistic promise to make for 2024?
Congress has the ability to put back in place the rights that the Supreme Court took from the women of America.
In theory, it doesn't have the votes to do that.
But that's why we have elections. And that's why we are seeing around this country that when this issue is on the ballot, from Kansas to California, people vote in favor of upholding basic freedoms. The vast majority of Americans agree that the government should not be making this decision for the women of America.
What is it that you believe? I mean, what week of pregnancy should abortion access be cut off?
We need to restore the protections of Roe versus Wade.
We're
not trying to do something new.
Well, that was nebulous because it was about viability, which could be anywhere between 20 to 24 weeks. And so
no. Let me be very clear.
The Women's Health Protection Act that the White House also endorsed. Let me be very clear.
From day one, the president has been clear. I have been clear. We need to put back the protections that are in Roe v. Wade into law. Since the Supreme Court took it, Congress has the power and ability to pass legislation to put those protections back in law, and Joe Biden will sign that bill. So that is what we want.
But does it need to be specific in terms of defining and where that guarantee goes up to and where it does not? At which week of pregnancy?
We need to put back in place the protections of Roe versus Wade.
You know why I'm asking you this question, though, because
we're not trying to do anything that did not exist before June of last year.
It wasn't crafted into law, and that's why I'm asking you for the specifics there, because Republicans say the lack of a precise date in cutting it off. You know this. They say that allows Democrats to perform abortions up until, birth.
Which is ridiculous.
Which is statistically not accurate.
And it's ridiculous, and it's a mischaracterization of the point. No, the point is...
But do you need to be more precise?
I am being precise. We need to put into law the protections of Roe versus Wade, and that is about going back to where we were before the Dobbs decision.
But if there is the possibility through legislation to provide any kind of guarantee at the federal level, any kind of protection, like the Republican proposal of 15 weeks protection,
the Republicans are also members of the Republican Party are also proposing a national ban. The thing that
I'm talking about, the Lindsey Graham bill, as you know, and those proposals of giving some access, though that's 15 weeks. Why do you think it shouldn't be specific? Out in New Mexico, for example, the governor there says it shouldn't be nailed down to a week because it should be a private matter between a woman and her doctor. There shouldn't be a precise number put on that. Is that what you believe as well?
I believe that we should put the protections of Roe v. Wade into law, and the way that will happen is if we have a United States Congress who, regardless of their personal view for themselves or their family, would agree that the women of America should be trusted to make decisions about their life and their body based on what they know to be in their best interest. It's that simple.
Even with that CBS stooge feeding her lines, Harris couldn't come up with anything better than the hollow propaganda that she will put the protections of Roe v. Wade into law. Here's another fun, vacuous Kamala Harris statement where she casually mentions population reduction.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
Weird. Another of Kamala Harris's career highlights include her suppression of the First Amendment right to free speech and free press. In 2016, Kamala Harris abused her power as California's Attorney General to persecute an investigative journalist who exposed Planned Parenthood's involvement in fetal trafficking.
April 5th, 2016. This is an idyllic Southern California spring day. As I'm walking out to take the kitchen garbage out, I turn around the corner and pass a big white windowless van. All of a sudden the door swings open and this tall uniformed guy steps out and he has a piece of paper in his hands and he says, "Are you David Daleiden?" And he says, "I'm with the California Department of Justice. We have a search warrant for your home." And he hands me the warrant. And I think to myself, oh gosh, what's going to happen next? So about 5 or 6 California DOJ agents started stomping through my apartment. The other 5 of them standing on the lawn outside. Some of them were armed with AR-15s. Some of them had canine dogs with them. They had come for me. In 2013, I began and orchestrated an almost 3-year-long, very in-depth, comprehensive investigative journalism study about the harvesting and trafficking of body parts from late-term abortions. There's multiple violations and multiple issues that you very quickly start to learn about when you look into it. There's the basic problem of selling body parts, where you're basically creating a system, creating transactions, creating business relationships that incentivize the objectification and the destruction of human beings in order to keep the business going. So for about 30 months, we went undercover with the explicit purpose of partnering with some of the biggest Planned Parenthood abortion clinics in the country to send their technicians in, harvest body parts from the abortions that were being done that day, and then package up the parts and ship them off to different customers all around the country, sometimes around the world. In July of 2015, we began to release the Undercover video series. I had been hoping that this was something that would, that would maybe generate 100,000 views or something. Instead, what happened was even bigger than I could have imagined. Within less than a week, we had close to 3 million views on YouTube of the first video, and multiple congressional committees announcing that they were launching federal investigations of Planned Parenthood's involvement in fetal trafficking and fetal experimentation. The truth got out there. And the words of Planned Parenthood's own leadership describing their organization's participation in these activities went viral and was being publicized for the whole world to see. Looking back on it from the information that we know now, I now know what was going on was that Kamala Harris, at the explicit instruction of Planned Parenthood, had targeted me and me alone among all undercover video news gatherers in the state of California to enforce the California video recording law against me and to punish me for speaking the truth about her powerful campaign donors at Planned Parenthood. What we've come to learn in the years since, just 2 weeks before serving the search warrant on my home, Kamala Harris had a secret meeting in Los Angeles with several top-level executives of Planned Parenthood in California. We then found out from the California DOJ investigator reports that Planned Parenthood's top lawyer in California had specifically instructed the California DOJ agents that Planned Parenthood wanted the video equipment and the computers that I was using to publish the videos to be seized, in order to shut me up, in order to prevent me from continuing to publish the truth about Planned Parenthood's involvement in fetal trafficking, and in order to punish me for speaking out with a message that was disfavored by Planned Parenthood and by Kamala Harris in the state of California. I think what people have to understand about organizations like Planned Parenthood and about their political backers like Kamala Harris is that they're shameless. And they will do whatever they have to do in order to promote their agenda. They'll say whatever they have to say, and they are not afraid to use every bit of power at their disposal to force their agenda through. Kamala Harris is the single greatest threat to First Amendment civil liberties that our country has ever seen. If Kamala Harris is elected to be a heartbeat away from the highest office in the United States of America, you will have someone in the White House who has a radical contempt and disrespect for First Amendment civil liberties, someone who believes that she's entitled to use the powers of her office in order to punish the viewpoints of citizens who disagree with her.
What can be unburdened by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution? Here's a section of Dalyden's investigative expose, including testimony from former STEM Express employee Holly O'Donnell and an undercover interview of Dr. Mary Gatter, president of Planned Parenthood's Medical Directors Council.
My name's Holly O'Donnell. I'm 24 and I'm a phlebotomist and an ex-procurement technician. For those who don't know what a phlebotomist is, basically you draw blood for a living. I was looking to help the public. I'm looking to make blood draws easy for children, for people. I'm very passionate about people. I'm very humane and very sensitive. I thought I was going to be just drawing blood, not procuring tissue from aborted fetuses. I basically just went on Craigslist, typed in the word phlebotomist, lab technician, and I clicked the link to apply. It said procurement technician. I went to the website, it said STEM Express, and apply now. I applied. It was really short. It wasn't even an application. It was your name, your phone number. That was it. And I got an email back, and I interviewed. And they don't even let you know in the interview what you're doing. STEM Express is a company that hires procurement techs to draw blood and dissect dead fetuses and sell the parts to researchers. They partner with Planned Parenthood and they get part of the money because we pay them to use their facilities and they get paid from it. They do get some kind of benefit. We were asked to procure certain tissues like brain, liver, thymus, pancreas, heart, lungs, skin, pretty much anything on the fetus. It's basically human trafficking of fetal tissues. They weren't looking for a compassionate individual at all. They were just looking for someone who could get as much money, as many samples. I think that's why they were interested in me as a phlebotomist, because I can draw quick. So I think that they looked at that and they wanted someone who could get the numbers up. The owner, Kate Dyer, she used to be a procurement tech, and then she went and started her own business. And now she's making a lot of money based off the poor girls half the time don't even want to get abortions. It's a pretty sick company.
Okay, so I'd like, what would you expect for intact tissue? What sort of compensation? What sort of?
Well, why don't you start by telling me what you're used to paying?
Okay, I don't think so. I would like to know what would make you happy. What would work for you?
Well, you know, in negotiations, the person who throws out the figure first is at a loss, right? So.
No, I don't look at it that way. I know you want to play that game. I get it, but no, I want
lowball because I'm used to low things from.
You know what? If you lowball, I'll act pleasantly surprised, and you'll know it's a lowball.
Okay.
What I want to know is what would work for you. Don't lowball it.
Okay.
Tell me what you really.
$75 a specimen.
For whatever we could procure, they would get a certain percentage. The main nurse was always trying to make sure that we got our specimens. No one else really cared, but the main nurse did because she knew that Planned Parenthood was getting compensated. So she wanted to make sure that everything was going great for us, it was going great for them, and for us, and it was going great for them.
And are we agreed that $100 would keep you happy?
Well, let me agree to find out from other affiliates in California what they're getting. And if they're getting substantially more, then we can discuss it then.
Yes.
And if this is in the ballpark, then that's fine. If it's still low, then we can talk about it.
You would. What you would do?
I want a Lamborghini. I said I want a Lamborghini.
Some of these women don't know if they're going to get an abortion. Some don't even, they're not 100% they're going to get it done. Didn't know a lot about Dr. Berman, this other than he worked for Planned Parenthood. There were actually comments made about him. He had a reputation for going viciously fast. Like, if we didn't watch him, we would lose our specimens. It was that fast. If there wasn't a girl in the room, he would get mad. He would pace the hallways if there wasn't something to do. Like, it's almost like he wanted to do it. And that made me really concerned. And how fast he was going with these women. And I felt bad. Like, there was a few times to where if he was working and I had a girl who did not want to get it, but she felt she had to, I wanted to tell her, do not go to this clinic. When I imagine, because I've seen abortions, I imagine him literally going into the room, lifting the covers, going in, grabbing, and walking out. Like, that's how fast it is. It's ridiculous. The women I worked for were cold. It's cold. They don't care. They just wanted their money. They didn't care that the girl was throwing up in the trash can, crying. And even there are times to when the patients would ask me, like, they would come in and be crying, like, should I do this? Should I be doing this? And from my personal view, I'm very pro-life, and I would tell them, like, run, like, go, like, you'll figure something out. You don't want to do this. Like, if you don't want to do this, go home. And I would get in trouble for that. I get in trouble. Jessica would say, why don't you consent her? Like, because she was crying and throwing up, and she didn't even know if she wants to get it done. What'd you say to her? I told her if she wasn't comfortable with it, then I'm not going to do anything. She said, well, that was an opportunity you just missed. Like, I'm not gonna tell a girl to kill her baby so I can get money. And that's what this company does. Straight up, that's what this company does.
In March of 2024, Kamala Harris made history as the first sitting president or vice president to visit an abortion clinic while in office when she visited a Minnesota Planned Parenthood clinic. Oh, and her father, Donald Harris, was a professor of radical Marxist economic policy. It's almost enough to make you ask, does Kamala Harris value black lives? Or is she more concerned with the destruction of black nuclear families? Finally, it's worth re-examining the court case that granted the federal government the right to mandate abortion surgeries to the states. In 1973, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled 7-2 in Roe v. Wade that individual state laws banning abortion were unconstitutional. The court argued that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution provides a fundamental right to privacy, which protects a pregnant woman's right to an abortion. Jane Roe, whose real name is Norma McCorvey, became pregnant in 1969 with her third child. McCorvey wanted an abortion but lived in Texas, where abortion was illegal, except when necessary to save the mother's life. McCorvey ultimately did give birth and put her daughter, Shelley Lynn Thornton, up for adoption. During the pregnancy, McCorvey had been recruited by attorneys Linda Coffey and Sarah Weddington, who were looking for pregnant women seeking abortions. The case took 3 years in the court system until the Supreme Court's ruling in 1973. When McCorvey asked what was needed to be part of Weddington and Coffey's lawsuit, she was told, "You're white, you're young, pregnant, and you want an abortion." The lawyers asked if she thought abortion should be legal. McCorvey said she did not know. Weddington told her, "It's just a piece of tissue. You just missed your period." McCorvey had initially tried to get a legal abortion by claiming her pregnancy was the result of a gang rape by a group of black men. But guess what? She was lying.
Jane Roe's story was a terrible one. She said she had been gang raped, gotten pregnant, was desperate to get an abortion. That's what everyone believed, as long as Jane Roe remained anonymous. When she went public, she told a different story.
You were raped while you were in Georgia?
No, I wasn't.
You were not?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, so all those stories that are in the books and so forth are not true?
Yes, sir. Yes.
They're not true.
Right.
And it turned out that lying wasn't the only embarrassment this darling of the pro-choice forces presented. In her personal treatise published last year, Norma McCorvey told the story of her somewhat sordid life. Then she still adamantly supported abortion. Now she adds that to the list of sins she took with her into the baptismal pool.
I've cheated people out of money. I've sold drugs. I was an abusive alcoholic for many years. I've done a lot against his teachings. But I think the far greater sin that I did was to be the plaintiff in Roe versus Wade.
When it comes to political footballs, have any topics been used to divide the public more effectively than that of abortion? Where a court case in which a white woman lied about being gang raped by a group of black men increased the power of the federal government, enabling it to mandate abortion clinics to the states. Where vipers like Margaret Sanger, Norma McCorvey, Martin Luther King Jr., and Kamala Harris have distorted the abortion conversation, deceiving the public and facilitating the termination of tens of millions of unborn souls, abortions that disproportionately target black communities, fooling us into thinking that abortion is about women's reproductive rights versus a patriarchal government led by conservative white men that want to repress women, when abortion has really always been about eugenics, organ harvesting, and child sacrifice. If Marxist subversives have used propaganda and social engineering to distort the reality of abortion and to destroy black families, what other social movements have been used as their weapons of deception? Black Lives Matter and transgenderism. In 2013, 3 women formed an organization modeled on radical movements like the Black Panther Party of the 1960s and 1970s. Black Lives Matter, or BLM, was formed by Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi after George Zimmerman, a white man, was acquitted in the shooting death of an African-American teen, Trayvon Martin. The organization seeks to highlight racism, discrimination, and racial inequality experienced by black people, to promote anti-racism, and to defend against police brutality and other racially motivated violence against black people by defunding the police. The BLM movement expanded nationally in 2014 following the deaths of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and Eric Garner in New York City. Then, during the lockdowns of 2020, the organization's influence expanded significantly after the death of George Floyd. Floyd's death was officially declared a murder by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. The Economist reported that between May of 2020 and December of 2020, BLM-related causes raised donations of $10.6 billion. After Floyd's death, an estimated 15 to 26 million people participated in Black Lives Matter protests across the United States. But where did that money go? Has the movement strengthened the value of Black lives? Were Black communities and Black-owned small businesses supported by these donations in the activism of the 2020 Summer of Love? Investigative journalist Candace Owens released a documentary in 2022, The Greatest Lie Ever Sold, to explore these questions.
Where have you seen that money impacted throughout the city?
Democratic politics. I mean, that's...
We shared this place, right? And we went half on everything, you know, the rent, light, gas. So when it happened to Floyd, everything fell back on me and Alvin. So
you got a car out there, it's just sitting there. We couldn't do nothing with it because he didn't, we don't have the title. They won't take it or move it.
It is just shocking to me because of how much money was raised to think that where he lived, the bills weren't being covered. So Black Lives Matter released their 990 IRS filings, and of course, I wanted to jump right into it and find out exactly what happened to the approximate $80 million that was raised by them between July 1st of 2020 and June 30th, 2021. Okay, Vivek, so during the George Floyd death and the aftermath, you were in Silicon Valley, is that correct?
Yeah, I was running a biotech company, actually, and I was CEO at the time, that's right.
What was the corporate reaction in Silicon Valley?
There was a pledge of allegiance to one cause, to turn this man, who had died in a tragic death, no doubt, into some type of new modern messiah figure. And I thought that the religious quality of every company bending the knee was a bit odd, and I was actually pretty keen on making sure that I didn't lie to my employees, that I didn't tell them something that I didn't believe about this. I sent an employee all email, and I said, look, I understand there's racial riots across the country, or there's unrest across the country. I hope everybody's safe. Let us know if you need us to support you. That was about it. And I remembered the reaction that I got, that somehow that failed to meet the moment because I didn't recite the same ritual incantation that every other CEO was pledging allegiance to across the country, a corporate statement made by the same PR firm that effectively ended in Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been sort of investigating throughout this documentary, where did the money go that was given to Black Lives Matter? We've never even really got a full answer of how much money was given.
I often say that BLM now stands for Buy Lavish Mansions, because that's what the BLM movement does. You actually saw in recent weeks there was a person who was effectively working for BLM that personally purchased a mansion, and she pays $3 million for it. Within days, like I think it's 48 hours later, flips that to the BLM organization, who pays nearly $6 million for that same house, booking a personal profit to the person who actually bought it. So that's a self-dealing transaction that enriches personally somebody who's working for Black Lives Matter. Why is BLM buying big lavish mansions in the first place?
When their donors were understandably outraged by the luxurious purchase, Patrisse Cullors came forth and also admitted that she hired both her mother and her brother to work at the property. What sort of work, you ask? Well, Patrisse Cullors' brother, Paul Cullors, is a graffiti artist by trade. That's what he's done his entire life. He's done graffiti. Patrisse instead hired her brother to do security for her. She paid Paul $840,000. That's almost $1 million in just 1 year to her graffiti artist brother, his newly established security firm. Now, that makes her a great sister, but perhaps she's an even better baby mama, because Patrisse also gave funding from Black Lives Matter to take care of the man who fathered her son. His name is Damon Turner, and he received $970,000 from BLM to his company Trap Heels LLC, which purportedly provided live production and media. So that makes Patrisse a great sister, a wonderful baby mama, and also, by the way, she's a fun mom, because one of the events that Patrice organized at her BLM mansion was for her young son's birthday party. Nothing says taking on police brutality quite like hosting a birthday party for your young son in a Los Angeles mansion paid for by donors to the cause. Patrice likes parties, by the way, because she also threw a party there to celebrate the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And yeah, that's somewhat suspicious, because what do Democrats have to do with Black Lives Matter? I think I'll just leave that question open-ended. Also suspicious is the fact that Black Lives Matter designated a whopping $8 million to an out-of-country grant. What? I thought this charity was about addressing police brutality in the United States. Apparently, to do that, you need to send $8 million to Toronto, Canada, to an organization named M4BJ. They purchased a $6.3 million, 10,000 square foot downtown property in Toronto. And I should also mention that M4BJ is run by Patrice's wife, Janiyah Khan, because it is. She is the co-founder, believe it or not. And here's where it gets really interesting. Janiyah Khan is gender non-conforming. These terms can be quite sensitive, so let me just use photos to illustrate my point. Janiyah used to look like this, and now she looks like this. Now, that information would be entirely irrelevant if it wasn't for the way that Patrisse Cullors saw it fit to spend the rest of Black Lives Matter's money. Ready for some BLM pride? Well, according to their IRS form, $200,000 went to the Transgender Justice Funding Project. Another $200,000 went to the Transgender United Fund. Another $200,000 went to the Transgendered Law Center. Another $200,000 went to Black Transgendered Media. Another $200,000 went to the Transgendered Variant and Intersex Justice Project. Another $200K went to the Transgendered District. By the way, if you're wondering what that is purportedly going to be the all transgendered district, and I guess that's really, really important for Black America advancement in society, I guess, or whatever. Another $200K went to the St. James Infirmary. That organization, by the way, is for, according to their website, it's run by sex workers and is for them. Specifically, escorts, BDSM workers, strippers, peep show workers, phone sex operators, and webcam performers. It was actually the St. James Infirmary that created the Transgendered District. So that's just an organization within another organization, which, by the way, you see a lot of when you go through these documents. So yeah, going to be apparently great big things involving sex workers in the future for Black America. In continuation, the Center for Halstead received $200,000 from Black Lives Matter. They are Chicago's community center dedicated to securing the health and well-being of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and queer people of Chicago. Similarly, we have the Audre Lorde Project, which received $200,000, and according to their website, they are a lesbian, gay, bisexual, two-spirit, trans, and gender nonconforming people of color community organizing center. Another $400,000 went to Transgender Advocates Knowledgeable Empowering, or TAKE, as it's known for short. The founder of that organization is a transgendered individual by the name of Daronicia Duncan Boyd. Daronicia is also the executive director of the Transgendered United Fund, which I mentioned earlier, which secured $200,000. So a total $600,000 of BLM money went to a transgendered woman named Daronicia Boyd, who is operating two charities. I found that piece to be very interesting. Here is Daronicia describing in a 2020 interview how they were able to use that money that was received to the organization to purchase more real estate.
We're opening up a new resource center here, and the resource center is almost 3 times as big as our last space that we was in. So we have lots of space and lots of rooms for our clients to come in and enjoy.
I noticed that real estate seems to be a common theme amongst these transgendered organizations. Remember, there's the first ever transgender district, and there are also a couple of houses that are named on their IRS documents. For example, an additional $200,000 was given to the House of Tulip. According to their website, the House of Tulip provides zero-barrier housing to trans and gender non-conforming people. But the one that really stood out as the most nonsensical is the $200,000 that went to the Griffin Gracie Retreat and Educational Center, known as House of Gigi for short. According to that website, they provide services and resources that positively impact the lives, history, and visibility of transgender, gender questioning, and gender non-conforming persons. They admit that they purchased a property in Little Rock, Arkansas back in 2019, and that property was supposed to serve as an oasis and a retreat for transgendered person, but they admit, also on the website, that they actually never held such a retreat. First, because their founder had a stroke and was recovering, and then it was COVID-19, so they still couldn't host a retreat. And despite having never hosted a retreat at this amazing oasis property that they purchased, in 2021, they announced that they purchased a second property next door to the first one. So, yeah. Now, all of the organizations that I just mentioned, none of them, not one, is up to date on filing a tax return with the IRS, which is required for charities, because charities, remember, they don't pay taxes. In other words, I'm not able to tell you how any of these transgendered organizations spent the money that BLM poured into their organizations during the 2020 and 2021 tax year. If you continue to look through BLM IRS docs, you'll notice that they gave millions of dollars to various Black Lives Matter organizations throughout America, or at least at first glance, it appears that they did. A closer look, you'll see that they actually dispersed that funding to organizations that were in care of Black Lives Matter. This means that actually another organization is accepting the donation on behalf of BLM. So I decided to investigate that further, and I noticed a really bizarre pattern. A lot of those organizations train activists. They train the youth to become activists in their communities. One organization even goes as far as bragging on their website about their history of getting arrested, protesting, and they offer courses on various techniques like bird dogging. That's a technique that's used to confront politicians. I thought to myself, it's interesting because I kept hearing over and over again while filming this documentary that people felt as though the protesters that arrived throughout these cities weren't actually from the cities that they arrived in. They didn't know where they had come from. I remember buses. There was this idea that buses were showing up filled with protesters. It's a fair question then. Is it plausible that Patrice was giving money to groups that were creating protesters, or training activists rather? I mean, why else would Patrice give millions of dollars to so many trained activists?
Weird. I wonder why that money didn't go to black communities, and the activism didn't focus on improving black lives. If I didn't know better, I'd ask, was Black Lives Matter really about funding transgender organizations, buying lavish mansions, and radicalizing young Americans? Also, here's a quick trivia question for you. Which gender of child commands the highest price from human trafficking networks? Option A, boys, or option B, girls? Option C, transgender children, especially those who have had their genitals mutilated under the facade of pediatric gender-affirming care. Elite human traffickers like George Soros, the vulture hedge fund oligarch known as the man who broke the Bank of England, also partner with corrupt NGOs and purchase real estate through these tax-free charities. They then use these properties both above and below ground to traffic and pimp out children and adults for rape, torture, murder, and satanic ritualistic abuse. By the way, did you know that even though BLM claims to be a grassroots, decentralized, loose confederation of groups advocating for racial justice, that it relies on a single fiscal sponsor, the Tides Foundation, to oversee the books of the over $10.6 billion donated to BLM-related causes? Or that the Movement for Black Lives received a $33 million grant from Open Society Foundations in 2016, alongside additional grants from John Podesta's Center for American Progress? and that both the Tides Foundation and Open Society Foundations are NGOs funded and controlled by George Soros. Weird coincidence, right? During 2020, the BLM incited protests/riots did $1 billion in damage to small businesses. In 2020, murders increased 37.9% in America's cities. The barrage of propaganda disseminated by BLM and their partners in the corporate media, meanwhile, seemed to support this trend towards violence. This trend towards instigating division between races rather than towards unifying the country. We saw similar tactics used by the Black Panther Party as the nonviolent civil rights movement lost steam after MLK's assassination, and the torch of revolution was transferred to the Panthers. Here's a clip from the 2015 documentary Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, a film which, for some reason, seems to idolize the Black Panthers, despite the evidence this organization was heavily involved in organized crime.
Photographers took advantage. I mean, they took our pictures, they put them on newspapers, they put them on magazines, and that look that we projected, you know, the big afro, the leather jacket, the shades, that became a hit. And obviously, photographers were drawn to the Panthers.
Well, we hear a great deal about the Black Panthers. Black Panthers.
The Black Panthers. The Black Panthers were absolutely unique.
The Black Panthers. The Black Panthers. Black Panthers. Black Panther Party. Black Panther Movement.
Black Panther Party.
Black Panthers.
I think the Black Panthers really understood the media. They knew what we were after. They knew what we were focusing on.
The Panthers has amounted to the Black Panther Party.
Many people know of the Panthers.
You might say that we exploited the Black Panthers, but I think there's a lot of evidence that they used us to their advantage. They were able to establish their legitimacy as a voice of protest.
The chairman of the Black Panther Party, and here he is.
We have a film of your breakfast program. Is this without sound also?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Would you comment on this?
Yes, I will. This is a free breakfast for children program, and they're preparing the food there early in the morning. It's about 2 hours work in the morning. These party members primarily set this whole program up, and then we get involved as many of the community people as we can.
Who I want here? People in there. Come on in, little brother. Come on in, little sister. Y'all can sit down and get something to eat.
Hoover saw any form of black organizing as a threat to the status quo as he saw it. Change that would have involved equality, that would have put power in black people's hands, was very much a threat to Hoover. He started something called COINTELPRO, directed against what he called black nationalist hate groups.
COINTELPRO was the abbreviation of Counterintelligence Program.
The purpose of this new counterintelligence endeavor is to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of black nationalists.
Neutralize could mean making somebody an informant, or putting somebody in jail, or having somebody killed. Hoover was sending letters to various offices almost on a weekly basis to come up with new ideas to go after members of the Black Panther Party.
"245 of the 290 COINTELPRO actions were against the Black Panthers. One of the mandates was, do not make this program public. Do not tell anybody that it exists.
FBI has a memo that states the objectives of counterintelligence operations. One is to prevent the rise of what they call the Black Messiah, a single charismatic leader that could unify the movement. They want to prevent the appeal of radical political movement to black youth. And they wanted to isolate these groups to prevent them from gaining respectability in the black community. And they were very explicit in stating these goals.
We were followed every day. We were harassed. Our phones were tapped. Our families were harassed. My parents were both visited by the FBI.
We must create suspicion with respect to their respective spouses, and your imagination and resourcefulness must be employed in order for the Bureau to be successful.
They would send letters to my wife, and the letters would say that Landon is sleeping with this woman or sleeping with that woman or sleeping with the other woman. Then when I got arrested, the FBI came to me and said, look, we got all this evidence. All these people are going to flip and turn on you. We're going to execute you because we got you now. We're going to execute you. But if you will be an informant for us, then we'll let you go.
My recruitment by the FBI was very efficient, very simple, really. I'd stolen a car and went joyriding over the state limit. And they had a potential case against me, and I was looking for an opportunity to work it off. And a couple of months later, that opportunity came when FBI agent Roy Mitchell asked me to go down to the local office of the Black Panther Party and try to gain membership.
The FBI wanted to destroy the Panthers. They absolutely saw the Panthers as the vanguard of a very, very threatening and violent revolutionary movement. They absolutely wanted this organization to be destroyed.
It was Huey and Bobby's ideal to draw a pig, drawing that would symbolize the police. So the first pig I did was one on the 4 hoofs. They just came to me one night while I was standing up on 2 hoofs. Put a bandolier, gun bandolier on with the holster and the badge and the flies around it, and that became the symbol, icon of the pig. It took on a life of its own.
That rhetoric didn't bother us when it was spoken by the Panthers. But when it was picked up by college students, them saying it, that definitely bothered us. I was a sergeant patrolling in the projects, and there was a cutest little girl. So I stopped to say hello, and I said, "Hi, honey, how are you doing today?" And she looked at me and she said, "Fuck you, pig." And I thought, we have lost it, man. We have flat lost it.
Anybody that criticized the police, especially that didn't have fear of saying it publicly, made the police angry. It was us against them. That became the theme.
We have seen the pigs on the scene. We know what he's like. We know what he's capable of. Just being a damn pig, oinking and beating and walking the street.
The police must be brought under control by any means necessary, including through force of arms. These racist Gestapo pigs have to stop brutalizing our community, or we're going to take up guns, we're going to drive them out.
That tendency to keep escalating the rhetoric, that was a major part of the growth of the party, but it was also a destructive force because you were always up in the ante.
I say guns, pick up the guns, pick up the guns and put the pigs on the ground. Pick up the guns, one more time, guns.
It brought all the repression down on them before they were prepared to handle it.
I just want to deal with black and black liberation. My scene is picking up my damn gun, and I'm a mother. Have my baby in one hand, my gun in the other, and then I'm here, motherfucker, to get what's mine.
The
voice that called for justice and brotherhood has been stilled. Men of all races now must join together in this hour to deny violence its victory and to fulfill the vision of brotherhood.
The effect of the death of Martin Luther King and the Panthers is overwhelming in the sense that once King was assassinated, and the way he was assassinated so publicly, it shattered many, many people.
They had killed their last chance for me to be peaceful with them. They had killed their last chance for negotiation. They killed a man who walked through hell to try to get along with you. And you killed him? That was our champion. You killed whatever hope I had in you, and I have no more use for you. None.
I believe that there was a decision made that some response on the part of the Black Panther Party has to be made to what happened to King.
Eldridge Cleaver was worried that if the Panthers didn't take decisive action, they would cease to be the vanguard. So he had this idea of actually actively attacking the police. He goes and he approaches members of the party in Oakland, and all of the older people refused to participate. They knew that this would be suicide. But the youngest member of the party, little Bobby Hutton, decides to follow Eldridge into battle.
Little Bobby called me, "Big man, I need a weapon." I gave him a Winchester 12-gauge pump shotgun that I had. And I told him, well, be careful out there, watch yourself. And he said, okay, I will. And he left. And then first thing in the morning, I have the radio on.
The Oakland police stated that they were fired upon during a routine investigation of a suspicious person, and after a short search, cornered Hutton and Eldridge Cleaver in the basement of a nearby house.
A tear gas canister blew up, and the basement they were hiding in caught on fire. They decided they didn't want to burn to death. They would rather surrender. Eldridge told Bobby Hutton to take off all your clothes so they can't say you're concealing a weapon. When you surrender, take off everything. But Bobby was embarrassed, and he just took off his shirt, and he kept on his pants.
Bobby Hutton came out with his hands in the air. First member who walked out of the house and was gunned down.
My heart sank. He's only 17 years old. He was one of the first people to get killed in the party, and so young. In essence, I felt they went out and got my little brother killed. What if I had not given him the weapon? Those are some of the demons that were in my closet.
Shot down like a common animal, he died a warrior for Black liberation. In the name of brotherhood and survival, remember Bobby.
That could have been my son lying there. And I'm going to do as much as I can. I'm going to start right now to inform white people of what they don't know.
For the Black Panther Party, it was crisis and chaos because this was the first time that this had ever happened. There had been no Panther murdered by police.
We want nonviolence, just like Martin Luther King. But nonviolence on the part of who? To sit and watch ourselves to be slaughtered like our brother? We must defend ourselves, as Malcolm X said, by any means necessary.
The Black Panthers were welcomed by all sorts of liberation movements. The North Vietnamese who were moving into a newer embassy gave their old embassy to the Panthers. And the Black Panthers, of course, loved being accepted like this.
In Eldridge Cleaver's successful attempt to establish an international wing, he's able to do some things that are very important. Malcolm X and other Black nationalists had talked about forging those types of alliances. The Panthers actually did it.
Nous souhaitons de nouvelles victoires dans votre lutte. Et nous espérons de vous recevoir à Saigon libéré.
And we hope to receive you in liberated Saigon.
Tell me, I hope to receive them in Washington, D.C.
At that time, America was being demonized considerably because of the war in Vietnam. So here we are, Black Americans who are opposed to all of this. We're the counter to the United States. We were able to connect with North Koreans, with Vietnamese, with the Chinese, and with also many African liberation movements, and many people came to see us there.
We came over here to do what we can to communicate to you what's happening in our struggle in the United States.
I think a lot of what draws these groups together is a kind of anti-American sentiment. If you want to really shake the American establishment, you want them to think that they are in danger, that a revolutionary new world is on its way. The Panthers are certainly the people you're going to support.
Since the United States of America is the backbone of oppression in the world, the blows that we strike against the empire there will also aid the liberation struggles in Africa, Asia, and Latin America as we aid ourselves.
Now, here are some other facts about the Black Panther Party you may find interesting. The Panthers promoted themselves as an organization founded in Marxist-Leninist ideology, also known as communism. The party's founders, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, raised money so that its members could purchase weapons, which they would then carry as they followed police looking for incidents of brutality. They raised this money by selling Mao Zedong's Little Red Book and reselling them to leftists and liberals on the Berkeley campus at 3 times the price. Every party member also had to study Mao's Little Red Book to advance his or her knowledge of the people's struggle in the revolutionary process. According to Bobby Seale, they would sell the books, make the money, buy the guns, and go on the streets with the guns. We'll protect a mother, protect a brother, and protect the community from the racist cops. As a reminder, Mao was the founder of the People's Republic of China and chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. During his Marxist-inspired Cultural Revolution, tens of millions of innocent Chinese civilians were killed. This violent internal revolution was spearheaded by young college students whose soft heads had been indoctrinated by communist propaganda. Real defender of democracy, Mao Zedong. I started part 2 of this series with a clip from KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov, in which he detailed the process of Marxist-Leninist ideological subversion. This is a slow brainwashing process that always follows the same 4 steps: demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization. Now, is it possible that despite their different structures and approaches, that the leadership of the civil rights movement, the Black Panthers Party, the Nation of Islam, Black Lives Matter, the CIA, and the FBI all have something extremely important in common? The objective of ideological subversion? The following clip comes from Mickey Willis's documentary, Plandemic 3, The Great Awakening, on the history of Marxist subversion in America.
In his Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx wrote, "The theory of communism may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property." Karl Marx was a German philosopher and social theorist who lived in the 1800s. He is the co-author of the Communist Manifesto, which has been referred to as the Bible of Communism. His theories of class conflict and dialectical materialism were instrumental in shaping socialist and communist movements worldwide. Joseph Stalin, Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, Mao Zedong, Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Kim Jong-un, Hugo Chavez, Nicolas Maduro, and many other communist revolutionaries have cited Marxism as the foundation of their political ideologies. Marx rejected all concepts of God, as well as the traditional family. According to members of his own family, Marx was emotionally, verbally, and physically abusive. His wife, Jenny, was plagued by depression, which was compounded by Karl's adulterous impulses. and his inability to provide for his children. Despite his privileged upbringing and formal education, Karl Marx was often unwilling to work and instead relied on the financial support of friends and family.
In 1943, the following directive was issued from party headquarters to all communists in the United States. It read, "When certain obstructionists become too irritating, label them as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic. In the public mind, constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind."
The founding fathers were racist, misogynist, fascist political party, radicals on the far right, anti-Semitic, xenophobic, transphobic, Uncle Tom's white supremacist, domestic terrorist, neo-Nazi organizer, Nazis. You are an anti-vaxxer. Anti-vaxxers. Racist.
Name-calling is their number one bullying tactic, and they apply it unremittingly to anyone who questions their dogma or says something they find unacceptable or offensive.
As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. They said in no unmistakable terms that the Negro people, because of their social status and their predominant working class composition, offered greater revolutionary possibilities than any other cross-section of the population.
How do we get out of this mess? Revolution, nothing less. Revolution, nothing less. Revolution, nothing less. Revolution, nothing less. Revolution, nothing less.
The communists call not only for extensive chaos within the cities. The plan is for raging fires from one city to the next. The average American, they say, soft and decadent, when he sees billows of black smoke rising from one horizon to the other, when at night the only light he has to see by is the flickering red from flames leaping into the sky, he'll become paralyzed with fear and panic and do nothing to interfere with the guerrilla bands as they strike at the community's power centers. To justify violence, they have to be able to claim that they're liberating people. And if people are to be liberated, then it's necessary to go through the motions, at least, of pretending that they have a right to form a nation of their own. The Communist Party called for their liberation, to break away from the United States and to set up their own nation within our borders.
Activists now control a barricaded area. It's been called an autonomous zone.
They want it to be free of capitalism, state authority, and police.
To take the United States, all of the United States, it'll be necessary, they say, to involve white people as well as black, and in general, to escalate the revolution in America from race war to class war.
Feed the rich and feed the poor. This is class war.
Now, when they talk about pressure from above, they mean using their people and their influence within the very government marked for takeover to bring forward official recommendations for legislation. The recommendations, of course, are offered supposedly as solutions to national problems, but when passed into law, their only real effect is to vastly increase the power of government and to move the country that much closer toward the ultimate goal. The pressure from below, then, involves using their influence over the various mass membership organizations of the country to create the appearance of great popular support for these recommendations. Of course, the members of those organizations must never suspect that they're being used to promote the communist program. Now, the silent majority, the average person, is caught right in the middle. He looks above and sees highly respected spokesmen for government calling for socialist legislation. He looks below and sees mobs of demonstrators shouting for the same thing. He says to himself, has everyone gone crazy or is it me? Now, he's still in the majority, of course, but he doesn't know it. He thinks he's helplessly outnumbered, and he bows to what he thinks is the democratic will of the majority.
Here's an interesting thing I've noticed is even with a lot of these
ideologies, right? With what people call these days, woke. If people were these horrible, awful, bigoted, racist, xenophobic, white, but it wouldn't even work. The only reason it even works is because people are so compassionate that I want to make sure I use the right words and I say the right phrases. So you're actually weaponizing the fact that people are decent people, and you're taking that compassion and you're targeting it at, this is the group of people who you should be angry at. They weaponized human compassion.
We mustn't kid ourselves into thinking that the communists have placed their agitators only into the black communities. They're working both sides of the street. They want hatred, violence, and bloodshed between the races, and they don't care how they get it or whom they use, even children if necessary.
My young comrades. Hi. This is my way of figuring out if you've been tainted by the patriarchy.
Patriarchy? Oh, this looks creepy.
It looks creepy. Why?
There's just this thing about white people that just makes me be like...
Oh, looks like Donnie got a full cookie.
Because he's a white man. Say it with me. Structural racism. Yeah!
You may have wondered why the Communist Party has been a staunch supporter of the drive to place a black studies curriculum into our high schools and colleges. The reason becomes obvious the minute you take a look at the textbooks and the study guides.
Schools are now radicalizing our kids. I mean, this is the volume of the book from Critical Race Theory, and it literally says here, whiteness is a bad deal, and it has a symbol of Satan.
You gonna deliberately teach kids this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You gonna purposely tell a white kid, the black people are all down and suppressed? How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed?
Not only is it in the schools, but it's in the workplace, it's throughout society. It's destroying this country.
If this continues, we will look back and be responsible for the dismantling of the greatest country in the world by reverting to teaching hate and that race is a determining factor on where your destiny lies. Thank you.
Sarasota School Board Chairwoman, what has been the worst of what you've had to deal with in terms of community or parental reaction?
The calling of names, tyrant, Marxist, communist, and they want to move kids over to charter schools and private schools without the oversight of the state. And that's wrong.
Education authorities in the United States are asking the government to use anti-terror laws and involve the FBI against parents who protest against the way their children are being taught.
It identifies no fewer than 13 possible federal crimes, including making annoying phone calls. How about this one? They could be prosecuted for using the internet in a way that might cause emotional distress.
Over the weekend, Democrats voted to ban gendered language in House rules. And that means no more terms like father or mother.
Is the administration's official policy to replace the term woman with birthing people?
Black birthing people. Black birthing people. Black and indigenous birthing people.
You shifted from using the term mother to birthing people.
Again, if we're trying to be precise in the language that's used.
Mom's a pretty good word.
I'm not a birth person. I'm a mother. Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition?
No. Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
The meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
Do you believe then that men can become pregnant and have abortions?
Yes.
Literally everything that was fought for women's rights is going straight down the drain.
This environment that has been created and corrupted and manipulated does not respect women, does not respect children, does not respect men. It cares nothing for family. So that's why they have to attack mother and remove father, because she's going to protect that child, he's going to protect that woman, and they both are going to protect society.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for your service.
When you talk about a parent-child relationship, you're talking about something primal that is in the heart of the liberal, not the Marxist, that's in the heart of the person who's conservative. And they're pushing the boundaries on something that they cannot control.
Washington state is on track to lawfully take gender-dysphoric children away from parents who oppose transitioning treatment.
That is against the Constitution. The only time a parent loses their rights is if there's an extreme circumstance.
It's severing the bond between the parent and the child.
What they're doing is they're dividing families to take control of the children.
The biggest offense against communism is the nuclear family.
In Chapter 2 of his Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx wrote, "Abolition of the family. The bourgeois family will vanish as a matter of course."
We're here today to represent the millions of black Americans who disagree with the Black Lives Matter movement. If you go to Black Lives Matter website, it says that we disrupt the nuclear family. That's my wife. This is our 4 children. Why would you disrupt the nuclear family?
Because the real objective is to remove the family as a possible alternate source of guidance and support. All totalitarian regimes strive to destroy the close-knit family in order to remove any loyalties that might be higher than to the state itself.
I have seen over the years in my practice a steady decline in the expression of healthy masculinity and healthy femininity. The separation between the male and the female is almost complete now. And it's due specifically to the ongoing attacks against masculinity and the degradation of femininity. And if our family structure is lost in the next generation, what do we have left? We're just a bunch of listless individuals living our lives out virtually behind a computer screen and following the orders of the government.
Maybe it's because I came in the movement at 17 and a half, so I have just a knack for knowing how to organize young people. I was at our publications table today, and I was speaking to this young person, and he grabbed the book, and he said, it's like Mao's Red Book. And I was like, man, that's what I was thinking. And it was just really cool to hear him make that connection. I was like, how about you buy 10 to 15 of these books, and you all have a youth organizing group where you talk about it, and you really try to engage this. We need to build off of this. We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular, we are trained Marxists. I do believe in Marxism. It's a philosophy that I learned really early on in my organizing career.
Investigations into the Black Lives Matter organization has revealed links to groups that are pro-communist China.
The self-proclaimed Marxist Black Lives Matter co-founder Alicia Garza also owns the Black Futures Lab project. Yet all would be lost for the Black Future Lab if not for the Chinese Progressive Association. Donations to the Black Futures Lab don't go directly to the foundation itself. The Chinese Progressive Association gets them instead.
Through forensic investigations, we now know that the 2020 BLM fiery but mostly peaceful protests were organized and partially funded through a network of pro-communist organizations. One of the groups is U.S.-based Liberation Road, which was founded by a faction of the Communist Party of Vietnam. Liberation Road is allied with the new communist movement and has direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party. The San Francisco-based, communist-rooted Chinese Progressive Association formed a sister company called Asians for Black Lives to serve as a bridge between BLM and the Chinese Communist Party.
I spent a lot of time with President Xi. He's deadly earnest about becoming the most significant, consequential nation in the world.
It's time to unplug the bananas from our ears, to open up our eyes, and to see. We have been under attack by a cabal of subversives for generations. Do you ever wonder why American history books drill the threat of far-right authoritarianism into us, specifically the Nazi regime? Yet they're sparse on recording the far-left tactics of Marxist-Leninism that destroyed two of the largest, proudest empires in history during the 20th century, through the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and the Maoist Revolution in China. It's because they're using the exact same tactics here. Demoralization, destabilization, crisis, normalization. Demoralization, destabilization, crisis, normalization. They've irritated the worst of black versus white race relations in their efforts to rip apart the fabric of America, but that is by no means their only leverage point of ideological subversion. On January 10, 1963, the Current Communist Goals by Cleon Skousen were entered into the congressional record, read by Democratic Congressman Sid Herlong Jr. of Florida. I'll go through all 45 now, and I'd challenge you to find any that have not been actualized or significantly advanced by our present day. Quote, the 45 Communist Goals as read into the congressional record, 1963. 1. U.S. acceptance of coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. 2. U.S. willingness to capitulate in preference of engaging in atomic war. 3. Develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. 4. Permit free trade between all nations regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. 5. Extension of long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. 6. Provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. 7. Grant recognition of Red China, admission of Red China to UN. 8. Set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the German question by free elections under supervision of the UN. 9. Prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the United States has agreed to suspend tests as long as negotiations are in progress. 10. Allow all Soviet satellites individual representation in the UN. 11. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. Some communist leaders believe the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow. Sometimes these two centers compete with each other, as they are now doing in the Congo. 12. Resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. 13. Do away with all loyalty oaths. 14. Continue giving Russia access to the U.S. Patent Office. 15. Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. 16. Use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. 17. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. 18. Gain control of all student newspapers. 19. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. 20. Infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy-making positions. 21. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. 22. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. 23. Control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art. 24. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. 25. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. 26. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, healthy. 27. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. 28. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the ground that it violates the principle of separation of church and state. 29. Discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. 30. Discredit the American Founding Fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. 31. Belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the ground that it was only part of the big picture. Give more emphasis to Russian history since the communists took over. 32. Support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics, etc. 33. Eliminate all laws or procedures which interfere with the operation of the communist apparatus. 34. Eliminate the House Committee on Un-American Activities. 35. Discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. 36. Infiltrate and gain control of more unions. 37. Infiltrate and gain control of big business. 38. Transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. Treat all behavioral programs as psychiatric disorders which no one but psychiatrists can understand or treat. 39. Dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist goals. 40. Discredit the family as an institution. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. 41. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. 42. Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition, that students and special interest groups should rise up and use united force to solve economic, political, or social problems. 43. Overthrow all colonial governments before native populations are ready for self-government. 44. Internationalize the Panama Canal. 45. Repeal the colony reservations so the United States cannot prevent the world court. End quote. Now I want to highlight something G. Edward Griffin said in that clip from The Great Awakening. Griffin is an investigative journalist and the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. Griffin has spent decades working to expose the threat of ideological subversion and the corruption of the Rothschild-controlled central banking system. Griffin stated, quote, "Now when they talk about pressure from above, they mean using their people and their influence within the government marked for takeover, to bring forward official recommendations for legislation. The recommendations, of course, are offered supposedly as solutions to national problems. But when passed into law, their only real effect is to vastly increase the power of government and to move the country that much closer towards the ultimate goal. The pressure from below, then, involves using their influence over the various mass membership organizations of the country to create the appearance of great popular support for these recommendations. Of course, the members of these organizations must never suspect that they are being used to promote the communist program. Now, the silent majority, the average person, is caught right in the middle. He looks above and sees highly respected spokesmen for government calling for socialist government. He looks below and sees mobs of demonstrators shouting for the same thing. He says to himself, has everyone gone crazy, or is it me? Now, he's still in the majority, of course, but he doesn't know it. He thinks he is hopelessly outnumbered, and he bows to what he thinks is the democratic will of the majority." End quote. This attack from above and from below highlights the depravity of the communist conspiracy and why its full extent has gone unrecognized by most for so long. The deep state cabal has been radicalizing the global population to the far left through the slow process of ideological subversion. At the same time, they have been consolidating global governance and commerce by establishing corporatocracy, squeezing the public from the far right. Corporatocracy refers to the vast network of corporations, banks, colluding governments, media outlets, NGOs, and the rich and powerful people tied to them. The cabal destroys the fabric of society from the bottom up by dividing and conquering, while in the chaos they consolidate industry and steal our wealth from above. And that brings us to the FBI, the CIA, J. Edgar Hoover, and Allen Dulles. As Allen Dulles is the John Brennan of the 1960s, J. Edgar Hoover is the James Comey of the 1960s. Earlier in the series, I mentioned that investigators who trace the history of black operations have discovered it's nearly impossible to determine where organized crime ends and where intelligence operations begin. There's arguably no one in the world better at investigating the history of black ops than Whitney Webb. Webb wrote the two-part book series, One Nation Under Blackmail, the sordid union between intelligence and crime that gave rise to Jeffrey Epstein. Webb traces the merger of intelligence operations and organized crime back to Operation Underworld, a 1942 intelligence operation led by the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, and the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. Operation Underworld involved the recruitment of high-level organized crime figures for work in American intelligence services, justified by wartime necessity. Mafia kingpins recruited into the program included Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. These mobsters were used by their intelligence counterparts to cultivate intelligence with Italians in Sicily in advance of the Allies' invasion of the island. The leadership of the OSS, meanwhile, tended to go to the sons of the country's wealthiest elites. Posts were held by members of the Mellon family of Pittsburgh, the family behind the Gulf oil fortune. Heirs of the Morgan, DuPont, and Vanderbilt families also held leadership positions in the agency. Nelson Rockefeller, meanwhile, headed his own intelligence agency, the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs, while his brother David Rockefeller also reportedly ran his own intelligence agency during the war. Nelson Rockefeller later became the unelected Vice President of the United States for unelected President and Warren Commission member Gerald Ford, following Richard Nixon's resignation in 1974 over Watergate. After the war, the ONI campaigned to have Luciano released from his prison sentence in exchange for deportation to Italy. His deportation was the beginning of an effort to cement in place a powerful organized crime network that was transactional in scope and wedded to the American intelligence services. Luciano was deported alongside Frank Coppola, the powerful Detroit mob boss who had been something of a mentor to Jimmy Hoffa, the mob-linked head of the Teamsters Union. By the 1960s, Hoffa and the Teamsters were working closely alongside the CIA, particularly on efforts to assassinate Fidel Castro, who had seized many of the mob's casinos during the Cuban Revolution. Meyer Lansky also had ties to mobster/bootlegger named Louis Rosenstiel. Rosenstiel had impeccable timing as he opened his Schenley Distillers Company in the wake of Prohibition's repeal in 1933. Now here's where things get interesting. The following excerpts come from Volume 1 of Webb's book, One Nation Under Blackmail, narrated by Grace Noble.
Rosenstiel maintained his links to the criminal underworld long after publicly transitioning from bootlegger to businessman. Frequent dinner guests at Rosenstiel's home in the years and decades after Prohibition included legendary figures of American organized crime, including Frank Costello, Sam Giancana, Santo Trafficante, and Meyer Lansky. Lansky was known to address Rosenstiel as Supreme Commander, a name that Roy Cohn, Rosenstiel's attorney and close friend, also used for the liquor baron. The King of Bourbon and Blackmail. Rosenstiel's obsession with blackmail. Indeed, reports of Rosenstiel's behavior at his company's offices, as cited by Nicholas Faith, included Rosenstiel having placed bugging devices throughout his offices. Per Faith, he would treat his employees like dirt, sacking them at a moment's notice, and then go to the toilet to leave them time to compromise themselves by talking in his absence. Those employees were compromised as their conversations were recorded by the devices that Rosenstiel had strewn about the premises. Additional assertions made in court and under oath by one of Rosenstiel's ex-wives held that Rosenstiel had also placed microphones throughout his home in order to record conversations that took place at social events he hosted for the alleged purpose of obtaining potential blackmail against his guests. In addition, several sources reported to the 1971 New York State Legislative Committee on Crime that Rosenstiel's Manhattan home had been wired from roof to basement with hidden microphones so that he could spy on visitors and staff. The system in Rosenstiel's home had been installed by Fred Otash, an infamous private detective who had used electronic means to spy on the Kennedy family, Marilyn Monroe, and others. Otash later said that Rosenstiel's home was rigged to tape conversations for hours on end. Otash had a penchant for blackmail himself, particularly sexual blackmail. He had once attempted to entrap John F. Kennedy using a call girl named Sue Young in the lead-up to the 1960 presidential election. As we'll see shortly, Rosenstiel was also involved in a broader effort to obtain this variety of blackmail, which may explain why he had sought out the California-based Otash to bug his New York home. Some of the sources that discuss Rosenstiel's interest in blackmail also claim that Rosenstiel was bisexual. According to Nicholas Faith, discussions about Rosenstiel's bisexuality among Schenley office employees were frequent enough for Rosenstiel to be referred to as Rosie around the office. Additional evidence for these claims later came from Rosenstiel's fourth wife, Susan Kaufman. Per Kaufman, whose previous marriage had collapsed because her first husband had been homosexual, she soon discovered that she had made a similar mistake in marrying Rosenstiel. Rosenstiel was reportedly uninterested in having sex with his new wife, but went to great expense to have her dress up in clothes that made her look like a little girl. He would later be discovered in bed with one of his lawyers, Roy Cohn, and shrugged it off to his wife by asking for some more alone time with his attorney. Kaufman remembered responding, "I've never seen Governor Thomas Dewey in bed with you," as Dewey was also one of his attorneys at the time, and she walked out. Kaufman remembered the young Cohn, who was best known for his infamous stint as Joe McCarthy's chief counsel during the height of the Red Scare, as flaunting his homosexuality whenever he was around Kaufman, openly caressing a former congressional associate in front of her, and describing the homosexual antics of a close friend of his and Rosensteel's, Cardinal Spellman, one of the most powerful figures in the Catholic Church in North America. Cohn reportedly was so open with her because her first husband had been gay, and I must have understood because I'd stayed with him for 9 years, Kaufman later stated. In 1958, Kaufman accompanied her husband, Louis Rosensteel, to a party hosted by Cohn at the Plaza Hotel in New York. Kaufman recalled entering through a side entrance and taking an elevator to the second or third floor. Her husband knew the way well enough that she had the impression he had been there before. The suite was one of the largest available at the hotel, and it was all done in light blue. Inside the suite were Cohn and another figure closely associated with both Cohn and Rosensteel, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. To Kaufman's surprise, Hoover was wearing women's clothes and wig, with Cohn introducing him as Mary in a bout of barely concealed laughter. Mary was also incidentally the nickname widely used among New York Catholic clergy for Cardinal Spellman, who was also alleged to attend other parties hosted by Cohn in the Plaza's Blue Suite. After being served a few drinks, Kaufman recalled seeing a couple of boys come in, young blonde boys, I'd say about 18 or 19, and then Roy Cohn makes the signal we should go into the bedroom. Sexual activities between the young blonde boys, Cohn and Hoover, ensued, with Kaufman declining to participate after being urged to do so by her then-husband. The Rosensteels then left, leaving the boys alone with Cohn and Hoover. Cohn later laughed about the incident to Kaufman, saying that Mary Hoover attends his parties regularly and that he would make sure to arrive at the plaza first with his clothes, the female clothes allegedly used by Hoover at the parties, in a suitcase. Additional evidence corroborating Kaufman as a witness came from 2 male witnesses who supported the astonishing allegations of Hoover's habit of cross-dressing, with those witnesses having learned of the former FBI director's habit at a different time and place than the events described by Kaufman. They also had no knowledge of Hoover and the Blue Suite parties in New York. In addition, Kaufman told Anthony Summers that she possessed photographs showing Hoover in the company of Louis Rosensteel's organized crime associates. Though Summers did not see these pictures personally, they were confirmed as authentic and had been seen by journalist Mary Nichols of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Nichols told Summers she did have suitcases of photographs that she had hauled away from her marriage to Louis Rosensteel. The ones I saw showed Hoover, lawyer Roy Cohn, and Rosensteel at all sorts of social events with mobsters. There is also evidence that not only did these parties at the Plaza Hotel take place, but that they were used to obtain sexual blackmail, with Kaufman asserting that her husband possessed pictures of Hoover wearing women's clothes and that those images had been passed to Rosensteel's associate, mobster Meyer Lansky. Journalist and author Anthony Summers has noted that, given Rosensteel's interest and ability to have his residences and businesses bugged, Rosensteel was quite capable of having the sex sessions at the Plaza bugged or arranging for Edgar to be photographed in his female costumes. In addition, New York attorney John Klotz, tasked with investigating Roy Cohn for a case well after Kaufman's testimony, independently found evidence of the Blue Suite at the Plaza Hotel and its role in a sex extortion ring, after combing through local government documents and information gathered by private detectives. It allegedly involved minors as well as young men aged 18 and older. Klotz later summarized his findings, telling journalist and author Burton Hirsch, Roy Cohn was providing protection. There were a bunch of pedophiles involved. That's where Cohn got his power from. Blackmail. Further confirmation of Rosensteel's and Cohn's activities in the Blue Suite, later determined to be Suite 233, comes from statements made by Cohn himself to former NYPD detective and ex-head of the department's Human Trafficking and Vice-Related Crimes Division, James Rothstein. Rothstein later told John DeCamp, a former Nebraska state senator who investigated the Franklin scandal of the 1980s, that Cohn had admitted to being part of a sexual blackmail operation targeting politicians with minors during a sit-down interview with the former detective. Rothstein told DeCamp the following about Cohn. Cohn's job was to run the little boys. say you had an admiral, a general, a congressman who did not want to go along with the program. Cohn's job was to set them up, then they would go along. Cohn told me that himself. Rothstein later told Paul David Collins, a former journalist turned researcher, that Cohn had also identified this sexual blackmail operation as being part of the anti-communist crusade of the time. The fact that Cohn, per Rothstein's recollection, stated that this sex blackmail ring was part of the anti-communist crusade, coupled with Hoover's involvement in these blue suite events, suggests that elements of the government, including Hoover's FBI, may have been connected at a much broader level to the operation in a way that transcended Hoover's own personal involvement. Rothstein confirmed his statements to both DeCamp and Collins in an interview with me that was conducted in early 2020. He additionally told me that Cohn had told him that his role in this ring had originally come about because he himself had been entrapped and blackmailed, leading Rothstein to feel some sort of sympathy for Cohn. For those that may find it hard to believe that such an operation would take place with the involvement of the FBI director, there are also other, related allegations to consider. That American intelligence operatives and organized crime had competed and then collaborated to blackmail Hoover years before Kaufman witnessed these events at the Plaza Hotel, beginning in 1958. Lansky was credited with obtaining compromising photos of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover sometime in the 1940s, which showed Hoover in some kind of gay situation, according to a former Lansky associate, who also said that Lansky had often said of Hoover, "I fixed that son of a bitch." Meyer Lansky's widow also later claimed that her husband had acquired hard proof of Hoover's homosexuality and used it to neutralize the FBI as a threat to his own operations. The photos showed Hoover engaged in sexual activity, specifically oral sex, with his longtime friend, FBI Deputy Director Clyde Tolson. There is considerable separate evidence from the period that the close, professional relationship between Hoover and Tolson was also intimate, and that this was an open secret in Washington. At some point, these photos fell into the hands of CIA counterintelligence chief James J. Angleton, who later showed the photos to several other CIA officials, including John Weitz and Gordon Novell. Both Weitz and Novell later stated that the pictures they had seen showed Hoover engaged in oral sex on a man who Angleton identified as Tolson. However, only Hoover's face was recognizable in the photographs. Angleton also claimed that the photos had been taken in 1946. Angleton was in charge of the CIA's relationship with the FBI, as well as Israeli intelligence, until he left the agency in 1972. Angleton was also a CIA figure who had pushed for the agency to forge ties with Meyer Lansky, raising the possibility that Angleton could have received the photo from Lansky. However, Anthony Summers, in Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover, has argued that it was not Lansky, but William Donovan, the director of the OSS, who obtained the original photos of Hoover, and either he or another person at the OSS or early CIA had later shared them with Lansky. Summers also states that, to gangster Frank Costello and Lansky, the ability to corrupt politicians, policemen, and judges was fundamental to mafia operations. The way they found to deal with Hoover, according to several mob sources, involved his homosexuality. With the mobster associates of Rosenstiel being under significantly more pressure during the 1950s, in large part thanks to the Kefauver Committee, it's possible that Hoover's appearance at the Plaza Hotel may have served as additional insurance for these interests. Hoover, for his part, was likely already used to the realities of being blackmailed by this point, given that his private sex life had been known to the mob and U.S. intelligence community for years. He likely saw the opportunity to partake in the scheme as a means of amassing his own massive collection of blackmail. With thick dossiers on friend and foe alike, Hoover's office contained secret files on numerous powerful people in Washington and beyond, files he used to gain favors and protect his status as FBI director for as long as he wished. Even former OSS veterans like Richard Helms have made such claims, alleging that Hoover played a very skillful game with knowledge of the sexual habits of prominent people. Further evidence for this comes from journalist and author Burton Hirsch, who alleges in his book Bobby and J. Edgar, the historic face-off between the Kennedys and J. Edgar Hoover that transformed America, that Hoover had also been tied to Sherman Kaminsky, who helped run a sexual blackmail operation in New York that involved young male prostitutes. Kaminsky claimed to have been New York bred, but federal investigators later stated he was originally from Baltimore. Some reports claim Kaminsky had ties to Israel, having served in the Israel Defense Forces. The ring, which was called the Chickens and the Bulls by the NYPD, targeted prominent men who were closeted homosexuals throughout the United States, many of them married with families. Among those who had been blackmailed were a Navy admiral, 2 generals, a U.S. congressman, a prominent surgeon, an Ivy League professor, and well-known actors and television personalities. That operation was busted and investigated in a 1966 extortion probe led by Manhattan District Attorney Frank Hogan, though the FBI quickly took over the investigation, and photos showing Hoover and Kaminsky together soon disappeared from the case file. Kaminsky successfully avoided arrest for 11 years, having disappeared from a New York courthouse undetected during his sentencing hearing. Why would Hoover have been involved with the activities of Kaminsky? There are only a few possibilities. One possibility is that Hoover had been blackmailed by Kaminsky, though it's more likely that Kaminsky instead had ties to figures in organized crime that had already blackmailed Hoover long before. Another possibility is that Hoover was cozy to a second sexual blackmail operation targeting closeted homosexual men because he sought to pad his own library of blackmail for personal and professional gain. What does seem clear is that Hoover was well aware of the power that amassing blackmail afforded and was willing to indulge in taboo behavior at the Blue Suite because he was no longer concerned about being extorted or manipulated with sexual blackmail in ways that would end his career or destroy his public image. He had fallen in with the very crowd that had reportedly blackmailed him, later developing a symbiotic relationship with that same network. The most obvious and troubling symptom of this symbiosis was Hoover's reluctance to tackle organized crime as FBI director. Hoover repeatedly declined to use the Bureau to target organized crime networks, referring to organized crime as a local problem in which the FBI did not need to intervene for most of his nearly 50-year stint as the top law enforcement administrator in the country. According to congressional crime consultant Ralph Salerno, Hoover's apparent aversion to targeting organized crime networks, such as those in which Rosenstiel and Lansky figured prominently, allowed organized crime to grow very strong in economic and political terms, so that it became a much bigger threat to the well-being of this country than it would have been if it had been addressed much sooner. Such blackmail was not only wielded by organized crime interests to protect their rackets from FBI meddling, but also by American intelligence agencies. According to David Talbot in The Devil's Chessboard, McCarthy's efforts to target CIA analyst and CIA director Allen Dulles' ally William McBundy in mid-1953 led Dulles to put the squeeze on Hoover, who, despite having expressed doubts about McCarthy's campaign at this time, continued to feed the Wisconsin senator and Roy Cohn a stream of damaging information on his, Hoover's, Washington enemies. Dulles, himself the subject of a thick dossier kept in Hoover's office that documented his adulterous trysts, made sure the CIA maintained the blackmail on Hoover, including that which had been shared between OSS veterans, most likely James Jesus Angleton and Meyer Lansky years earlier. As Talbot notes, the CIA counterintelligence chief, J.J. Angleton, was rumored to occasionally show off photographic evidence of Hoover's intimate relationship with FBI Deputy Clyde Tolson, including a photo of Hoover orally pleasuring his longtime aide and companion, while one of Allen Dulles' mistresses was known to refer to Hoover as the Virgin Mary in pants. Vendetta begets vendetta. One of the many things that Roy Cohn and J. Edgar Hoover shared was having Robert Kennedy as an enemy. Hoover not only subverted the Kennedy-led effort to get Roy Cohn by passing Cohn the government's case against him on at least one occasion, he also looked for ways to bring Kennedy down. This was not motivated by Kennedy's efforts to indict Cohn, but instead by his efforts as Attorney General to rein in Hoover and bring down the organized crime networks that had first blackmailed Hoover and later formed an unsavory alliance with him. According to von Hoffman, regarding Hoover's strategy, hurting Kennedy demanded some ingenuity, for the target was clean on money, far cleaner on sex than his brother, in short, not an easy one to bring down. One approach might be to embarrass him with his liberal constituency, to depict him as a ruthless attorney general indifferent to the Bill of Rights and individual liberty. To put the plan into effect, Roy was needed as a membrane of protection for the director. Others were needed, including Congressman Gallagher, who was making a reputation for himself in the House as a civil libertarian, a legislator committed to preventing the government from turning itself, by aid of computers, lie detectors, and advanced electronics, into a free world version of Big Brother. Meyer Lansky had, by the 1930s, acquired compromising evidence of Hoover's homosexual activities. In the 1950s, Meyer Lansky and other mob figures, such as Sam Giancana, supplied women to John F. Kennedy, some of whom were logged into Hoover's growing files of dirt on the young senator. In the 1960s, this deep political equilibrium was threatened by Robert Kennedy's war on organized crime, which alienated Hoover. Feeling increasingly threatened, especially after the Kennedys began to collect their own files on Hoover, both Hoover and the mob began to escalate their collection of Kennedy's sexual dirt. At first, Hoover gained White House influence by protecting the Kennedys against mob blackmail, but in 1963, Hoover, desperate, began to leak some of his own dirt on Kennedy to the public. Hoover's sexual dirt on the Kennedys began to surface in late June 1963, after the president's peace speech at American University with its appeal let us re-examine our attitude toward the Cold War.
The same cabal that infiltrated the leaders of the civil rights and militant black movements, agitating the worst in race relations, has also been blackmailing and corrupting leaders of government and intelligence agencies for centuries. J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI used COINTELPRO to illegally surveil and infiltrate political organizations that the FBI perceived as subversive. The hard truth is that many of the organizations and leaders they targeted were, in fact, subversives working to destroy the fabric of society. Unfortunately, so is J. Edgar Hoover. The objective was never to bring down these criminal organizations to protect Americans. The objective was to further militarize and radicalize these organizations, sowing the seeds of a future race war alongside the long, slow brainwashing process of ideological subversion. The race riots incited in 1968 following the assassination of MLK Jr. and RFK led directly to the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, which Richard Nixon and his successors used to criminalize black and brown men for decades. In doing so, they destroyed black nuclear families, eviscerating their ability to own private property. We'll return to the history of race relations in the post-civil rights era in the next episode, part 5 of this series. In that episode, we'll begin by exploring the grandfather of conspiracies, who assassinated President John F. Kennedy.